Hey guys. So yeah, chapter 302 is a thing and oh boy. So the funny thing about chapter 302 of My Hero Academia honestly is that it's one of those where I I feel it's going to be one of the more controversial chapters for me to talk about just on my perspective alone on it. I feel it's one of those where it doesn't matter exactly what I have to say about it. I'm gonna have a controversial take one way or another. But right out of the gate, one thing I did find interesting with this chapter is how Toya and Shoto are it was I think it was definitely prevalent like pretty much throughout this whole like flashback, but I think this chapter it pretty much put in full focus how Toya and Shoto are basically mirror opposites of each other with how both represent a different side of the Todoroki family. Toya is the one who represents the darkness and the curse that the Todoroki family has been plagued by in just how they've given into their fear, their anger, their resentment, all that stuff. Well, Shoto, despite being so young at the time, had served as a single spark of light, one that, again, wasn't in because he was so young, wasn't necessarily strong enough to save the family, but enough to keep them moving forward. And even going deeper into that, for Toya, that darkness was bred from being consumed by his belief that he was only born to be a hero. He was bred with the he let himself consumed by his hatred and resentment that his only reason for existing was to be a hero, and obviously the rejection of that pushed him deeper into the darkness that everyone feared, and inevitably what led him to becoming Dabi. Whereas through Shoto, who was whereas on the other end of the spectrum we have Shoto, who on birth he was already so kind, had already developed. He in a lot of in some ways it feels like Shoto had kind of developed a kind of pure instinct in order to save people. In fact, one could very well make the argument that the first time Shoto had stood up to his father in this chapter, like that was pretty much his hero moment. Like the very moment he pretty much stood in front of his mother and protected her and protected her from his from pretty much Endeavor. That I think in a lot of ways could be kind of seen as pretty much Shoto's hero moment. Even though we would go later on to know just pretty much how much resentment he would inevitably how much that Shoto would inevitably kind of fall into that same curse of darkness that had plagued the family. Like that was the moment that showed the spark of light inside Shoto. And again, it was the moment where he just pretty much without even thinking he stood in front of his father and protected his mother. That was essentially Shoto's hero moment. So yeah, it's kind of interesting how there's two different perspectives of both the light, how this chapter kind of gives us both a perspective on the light and the darkness that presides within the Todoroki family, and from within their within their sons, more or less. Um, and well, and and honestly, but the only thing but the only thing but the only thing that was but the biggest thing about this, however, is that when you kind of get down when you really get down to it, what was pretty much going on with Toya at the time is that he pretty much needed what Toya needed was the kind of speech similar to the one Izuku had given Shoto like during the sports festival, the one where Izuku basically said flat out, "It's your power, not his. You're the one who can only make the decisions with your own life." And that's kind of the thing I think of what pretty much of what Toya needed. Almost he needed someone in order to say, it's your power, it's your strength, you're the one who only you can make your own destiny, your own life. But no one but everyone was basically just so afraid of Toya that no one ever really stood up and actually did anything about it. And the thing is, while I don't want to condone or wash away every horrible thing Endeavor has done to Shoto, because trust me, Shoto and the family, because trust me, Endeavor is the centerpiece of all this still at the end of the day. I don't want to wash any of that away, but at the same time, it is interesting to look back on previous events now and see how much of it was kind of motivated by Endeavor's own fear, and in his efforts to keep Shoto isolated from his other siblings, you could almost see he was trying to just keep him away from Toya, except on top of the fact that it only served to exacerbate the problem to the point where it turned Endeavor into the monster we would see at the beginning of the series. It was, in the end, that isolation was kind of the final push needed for Toya to become Dabi. But the saddest part of it is, if it wasn't for Izuku, Shoto's anger and resentment would have not only consumed him in the same way it did Toya, but it just puts into perspective how close Shoto himself was to pretty much losing that pretty much light that had kept the family from falling completely completely being consumed by the darkness of their own families history. But now, because of a combination of Shoto experiencing what it's like to embrace that darkness himself, and having confronted his brother, the very object of the family's curse, Shoto, whether subconsciously or not, has been conditioning and kind of preparing himself for pretty much this very moment. Like Shoto, in this moment more than anyone there, has resolved himself to taking up this fight, and I love how naturally it all played out, and how naturally everything played out, and especially the acceptance of Shoto being the one to face his brother felt so natural and not the least bit forced, because we pretty much kind of know that in a certain way, Shoto really is the kind of embodiment of both what it's like to experience both the light and the darkness of this family. So he's the perfect one who can he's the only one who can really pretty much confront his brother and confront his brother in the only way. Is the only one who can really confront his brother, and with the perspective he has. So yeah, although it's still going to be an uphill battle although at the same time it is still going to be an uphill battle for Shoto, because because Toya has let himself just become consumed but by that resentment, by that hatred, and it's just turned him into the monster known as Dabi we know today. So yeah, even if Shoto is ready, it's still going to be an uphill battle for him. I also really like how this chapter in a certain way played out as an intervention for the entire family, and how even if Endeavor was the center of it all, they still use this as an opportunity in order to take responsibility for their roles as well, because however small their inaction had just as much of an effect on the current situation as Endeavor being the center of Endeavor's actions, and him basically being the cause and effect of everything. And really, if anyone, and it's when I get down to it again, if anyone, whether Endeavor, Natsu, Fuyumi, Rei, just anyone had the courage in them, had the same courage that from Shoto had when he stood in front of his father at the time, when he stood in front of his father at the time, if they had that same amount of courage in the moment to step up, then there would have at least been a greater chance to avoid all this. It just required one person, and for that single person to make the choice to just be there, even if they didn't have all the answers, they still needed to make an effort and at least show that Toya wasn't alone. And yet, despite that, it's still kind of interesting to see that Shoto and Toya are the ones who united the Todoroki family in the end, because Toya's return as Dabi forced the family to confront their own demons. So I guess kind of a win-win in that sense. Now obviously, just from this review, I've heaped a lot of praise on this chapter and this whole mini story arc with the Todoroki family, but I will admit, it's kind of already becoming one of those scenarios where in the back of my, like, I'm enjoying what I'm seeing a lot, but in the back of my head, there are other things I'm thinking about. Like, the biggest thing right now is I'm thinking about what's going on with Izuku right now. Because honestly, the pretty much more I pretty much think about that final image with Izuku just laying there in the hospital bed in a coma, the more I'm forced to believe more than ever that Inko is dead. Because thinking back to that solitary panel, there's no way in hell All Might would be the only one at Izuku's bedside. She cares way too much about Izuku to the point where she would have just dropped everything and be right there for him. So at this point, I've generally got no other way to look at it other than Inko's probably dead. Like that's really all I've got to say. Like Inko is dead. I don't I don't know. Yeah, I don't know any other way to look at this. Like he's probably, yeah. I think weirdly enough, even though Izuku hadn't played a part in this in any of this so far, just thinking back on this chapter makes me think, yeah, Inko's dead. That there's no other explanation for it. But yeah, guys, that's all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and that's your control. Dead Knight of Enemy, signing off. Later, guys.